Welcome to the series we're calling The Short Film Angle, where we shine a light on some new short films and interview the filmmakers behind them, getting insights into the filmmaking and storytelling process. My name's Alex, and it's just me today. But don't worry, Chris will be back next week. This week, however, we're speaking to Julien Lasseur and Brian Groh about their short film that's about to premiere at the Sundance Film Festival, Somebody Cares. Julien is the director and Brian is the writer of the short film. Somebody Cares follows Barry, a lonely middle-aged deadbeat who must convince his estranged sister to wire him his dead uncle's inheritance before fate comes to collect. As I mentioned, the film is premiering at the Sundance Film Festival this month, and audiences will be able to catch the film there. But if you're not in Salt Lake City, the film will be available publicly to view for 3 days on the 30th of January. I'll put the link in the show notes. And we'll let you know when it becomes more publicly available after that date. It's also worth mentioning that in the interview, Brian joined the recording whilst at an airport. So I think the audio quality is pretty decent, but just so you're aware, Brian's quality may not be as crisp as mine and Julien's. But for now, let's get into the interview with both Julien Lasseur and Brian Groh. Welcome to the show, Julien Lasseur and Brian Groh. You are both very well traveled in the kind of short film world, both having made films together, several short films, and having won kind of accolades for them. I wanted a question to you both, really. What inspired you to I guess, pick up the camera or pick up the pen and get into filmmaking?
Yeah, I'll let Julien start. I think for me, my parents are documentary filmmakers, so I've just been around it my whole life. I grew up traveling the world with them and working on their films as early as I could lift a piece of equipment. And I think generally being exposed to it and just loving storytelling. I made a film in high school, and that was such a moment for me when I shared that film with everybody, and I got such a reception. That was kind of what bit me, really. And I moved to LA and studied art history and film production, and then have been working here in LA since. I met Brian on a indie horror movie found footage. He was a actor, just like an incredible improviser. We really hit it off. And then I shot a film for Brian, and then he joined me on Project Greenlight. That was the sort of Ben Affleck, Matt Damon competition. And really from there, we have just been collaborating ever since.
Amazing. What about yourself, Brian?
I had a very rural upbringing in the Midwest of Missouri, and had a real passion for space. And I was president of the Map and Science Club, so I thought I was going to be an aerospace aeronautical engineer. And as soon as I stepped out of the bubble of my very small farm community, I found that I was nowhere in the leagues of the competition of geniuses and people who had a lot of great prep before me going into those areas. So I kind of bummed around for a little bit, fell in with a group of actors, and was doing a lot of stage stuff. We were putting stuff up, and it was a blast seeing, written work put up on the stage. And that kind of affirmation really kept driving me. You wind up following success in life if you're doing something and people are rewarding you for it. So we were kind of this merry band of actors, and the LA theater scene, I think, is super interesting. It's a lot of weirdos just like come together, and because everyone's a little bit off, they're incredibly welcoming. So here I am, this kind of hickish kid from the Midwest, and it was open arms, and it was great. So flash forward to I wound up on a film set that Julien was on, and we started. We just kind of found each other. We're walking, and before you knew it, I'd written something that he was like, I think I can shoot that. And then we shot something, and it was on after that. So, we've had several short films now and longer form content that we put together. It's amazing that we've wound up at this point where we're at Sundance. kind of this history behind us at Austin and traveling Milwaukee to all these other film festivals with past projects. So as much as I wish that first project got into Sundance, I think, like Julien said, we've submitted a lot to Sundance, but we're in a much better position having gotten into Sundance now.
Amazing, yeah. So what was it about kind of you guys meeting together? What was there something that you kind of bonded on that kind of made you realize that you were like a perfect creative match for each other?
Making fun of everyone else. I think Julien retells a story one time where we looked at each other and we're like, this isn't so good, right? Just this isn't working. And not the project itself, but the specific scene. And then I think it's that brutal honesty, because you can get in that bubble surrounded by artists where everyone's high-fiving after the scene. And I came to find out very quickly, if everybody's high-fiving after the scene, it's probably not very good. You're just high-fiving because you just said all the lines correctly. And when I started working with Julien, the bar was much higher. And I think that's what attracted me to him for sure, was that brutal honesty. He was willing to look at something and just be like, that's not very good, right?
Like an honest feedback loop.
It's been fun. It's almost like, we sort of both come to a project with different ideas, and I think when we both land on an idea that we're both excited about, that's when we know we've got something. I think that, I don't know, without sounding too corny, but I think like being observers of humanity, finding humor in sort of the darkness that is part of humanity, I think is something that we really connect on. I don't know, just observers of like the human experience without judgment. I think
we had this weird ability, I think, to step outside ourselves and laugh at ourselves. If one of us dropped something or tripped something, we were at a costume house that was way overpriced, and we were already angry that we were in there. It was going to take up so much of our budget. And Julien snuck coffee in when they explicitly said, do not bring anything in here. No drinks, no food. And he was like, forget that. We are paying so much money for this stupid rental. And flash forward 20 minutes later, he spills his entire cup of coffee in this bin of period clothing. And we, instead of being in that moment, we saw the moment as it would have been on a film, and we started dying laughing. That was our reaction, and I think that is very true of our relationship. Is we're so quick to step out of the moment and be like, what if we saw this moment on film? This is outrageous. The irony of being the guys that want to
laugh at ourselves, not take ourselves too seriously.
I can see where your kind of humor aligns then, and how that humor has now kind of presented itself in this short film that we're going to talk about. I'm interested to know first though, where did the idea for Somebody Cares come from? Did you work with your production company 6 Degrees to develop the film, or did you kind of shoot the film and get them involved later on?
So it's an interesting story because Somebody Cares was part of a 2-week film challenge. So I think that we've had a lot of films that we've spent so much time developing over months or years. And this was one of those films where we had kind of a very vague theme given to us. And we had 2 weeks to make this film. I had worked with 6 Degrees on a bunch of commercials, doing work with Mercedes, and Patrick in particular was a really creative producer. One of those producers that really adds to the project and challenges your ideas. So he just seemed like someone I wanted to approach, and I said, hey, do you want to go in on this with me and we'll split the costs? And so 6 Degrees stepped in and financed half of the film, which I am just, super grateful for. But yeah, it was 2 weeks and off to the races, like from concept to full execution. That's Somebody Cares. I think, the inspiration behind it came generally from Brian and I's ideas and themes that we've constantly explored in our work. In terms of like the story and the script itself, Brian is totally responsible for that. I think we actually were working on a completely different idea, and it was too hard to produce in 2 weeks. And Brian, like the next morning, had this idea for Somebody Cares, and I was like, okay, great. And I loved it. It was so tightly written, and we just moved forward on that. We had some ideas of locations that we wanted to work, that we wanted to use, and actors. The two Shawns are really good friends, and knowing what they're capable of. So it was just that serendipitous kind of, connection of everything. And that's how the film came to be. Brian, do you have any?
Yeah, we really led with resources. What are our assets? Because this is not something you can just throw money at. We're not in the world where anything that we imagine, we can put that on screen. And sometimes that can be freeing, and sometimes that can be limiting. And this story's not that original. It's a gambler whose bad luck catches up to him. But what we traded for story simplicity, we gained with character complexity. And that's our world. I mean, for sure, that's our world. Have we seen this movie before? Yes, but definitely not in this way. And we really capitalized on a lot of the original characters that Julie and I really strive for, and these kind of unique scenes that can be relatable to people. And where I think all of our history paid off was it was that seamless. What Julian saw on the page didn't have to be explained. The actor, Shawn Parsons, we'd worked with before. And I do think these tones are tricky. How do you explain someone what a Lasseur Groh film, what that tone is? So we reached into the bag of the assets that we had with actors and locations. And that's what formulated, what you saw on screen with Somebody Cares.
Yeah, it's interesting as well that you mentioned, Shawn, you guys aren't the only kind of collaborative team that have paired together before. Obviously, you worked with Shawn Parsons on your TV show, Palomino and Swissy. I guess with it being a 2-week challenge, was it a case of like, got to call the friends, got to get them together and get this thing made? Was it your experience with Shawn that brought him back into the fold after working with him on the TV show?
I feel like with filmmaking, you find your tribe, and whoever joins you, it's just like a more comfortable experience. I think we had so much fun making Somebody Cares. It wasn't stressful. I mean, it was stressful leading up to it. I mean, I think I spent almost like 20 hours of location scouting at the start of the 2 weeks just to find everything. So some of that was stressful, but the actual shooting of it was just really fun. And we had an incredible crew. Everyone just had a great time. And Shawn's a friend. Other Shawn is a friend. And I think that, I think it translated into the movie that we just had a good time. And so, I mean, we want to keep that going forward, but people who tend to like working with us and we like working with them, we just carry them through to any project that we can. And then there's also this like honesty that opens up. Like if Shawn does a bad take, I can tell him it's a bad take without him internalizing it too much and, going down that road. And, likewise, he feels maybe a little too comfortable pushing back on some of the production elements that we could say, but it's just like a fun family kind of a vibe. And I think as we look to our feature that we're working on, we want to bring a lot of those same folks back.
Nice. That's it's nice to hear. Obviously, filmmaking is such a kind of team effort that being able to collaborate with your friends, obviously creative friends, makes it life a lot easier. Just for our listeners, do you want to kind of maybe describe what the film is about if they haven't seen it or if they are about to see it?
Brian, I'm going to let you take this one.
Sure. It's a gambler who on his birthday finds himself in a small mountain town, and he's fighting out from a hitman that the debt collectors have sent after him. So that's the environment. We're in this kind of mountain town, And from there, we'll let look, I don't know how many of the listeners will be able to see it. So we'll just flash forward to the end where there's an interaction with the hitman and our gambler. And the thing that the gambler is really looking for is currency in his community, that he's cared for and that he's loved. And I think that was kind of original about this character that winds up being appealing. And same with our hitman as well. He's empathetic. If anything, the hitman winds up being the real gambler because he takes a chance on this guy to see if he can come up with the money. And he kind of does it begrudgingly. So that's our story in a nutshell, is a gambler hiding out in a mountain town whose bad luck catches up to him in the form of a hitman.
Nice. I think the thing that stood out to me most, because obviously it's a very short film. It's a 5-minute short film, but you've got 3 characters in this film that are really well established within such a kind of short space of time. Like, you get an essence of their personality just from kind of opening shots, or how they might interact with other characters in that scene. And I was just interested to know, like, how much kind of thought have you put into each character's kind of backstory, and how interested were you in these guys, like, outside of the 5 minutes that we see them?
It's funny. I mean, we've definitely started to think about that. Pairing is so entertaining to watch. Could that be something that is developed into a feature? And I think absolutely. Take the sister, for example, like the development of her character. We find her in this bar before opening, and she is taking inventory of the bar. And that was one of those situations where it felt like the vibe of the bar fit the vibe that I wanted to carry throughout the film. Kind of a shout out David Lynch, but I think Twin Peaks was definitely a bit of an inspiration in terms of just like the visual tone for this. And so, Brian, the cabin that we filmed in is Brian's place. You can actually rent it on Airbnb. Shout out.
Very nice. Very nice.
So we're in this small mountain town 2 hours outside of Los Angeles. And we knew that we wanted to have the sister, because I think originally in the script, she was at home and she gets the call. And then I thought it'd be a little more interesting if she was somewhere or doing something when she gets the call. And that would be a little bit funnier if she's kind of interrupted. It's not just her just answering and being totally present, but finding something where she's busy doing something and takes the call. So we explored some like local businesses. There was like an antique shop. There was a candy store, and none of them really fit that vibe that we kind of wanted to have. And so we found this bar, and it was incredible. And that kind of added to her character. We actually met a bartender there who were like, oh my God, this is our character. And so I think it was a bit of like discovering who that person was and building who that person was, like in real time as we were like producing that.
Yeah. It adds very well as well in terms of that sense of setting. I think as a Brit looking at an American film, to me, the kind of setting was like a sweet slice of Americana to me. And I think the bar really helped with that. I thought it was just kind of added into those kind of feelings that I've you feel when you see kind of like a maybe like a more old school American film. That's how I felt anyway. Talking of kind of settings and scenes, I wondered if you might talk a little bit about kind of working with your DOP. I think it's Kyle Smolik.
Yeah.
And I was just interested to know, again, was that somebody who you had on board ready to go when you knew you were doing this 2-week challenge, or was this a call into a friend? And kind of what was that collaboration like once you'd found where you wanted to shoot?
Yeah, Kyle is just another friend. Worked with him before on commercial projects. He's my go-to DP when I have a project. What I love about Kyle is he just has a very calming presence. He's not this like overwhelming person on set. I think he works really quietly and just adds really interesting ideas. I think in my 20s, worked for a cinematographer, and I worked as a cinematographer for a while. So it took me a long time to find someone that I could really work with, that I felt like would add something beyond what I was already kind of bringing to it. So I've got a pretty strong sense visually of what I want to do when I'm shooting, and my general sense of what lenses and lensing for each situation and blocking. And Kyle like adds that something extra. Like I think, for example, in our opening scene when Barry walks out of the liquor store and he goes into the car. Originally, we didn't have a Steadicam for the production. And then the producer's partner is a Steadicam operator. He ended up being free the weekend that we shot, and so he came on board. And in my head, when I had shot listed everything, I didn't think about like a Steadicam. I didn't block it or like think about camera angles with Steadicam in mind. And so then that like added element, it's like I'm focused on the performances and thinking about the story. And then Kyle comes in and he says, well, you know, instead of these like 3 shots that you have planned, we could do this one camera move and then sort of reveal Vince, the hitman, in the back seat. And I think those are the little elements and ideas that Kyle brings that elevates the storytelling. And yeah, super grateful for his collaboration. He's just such a great guy.
I was also really intrigued about kind of like one of the final shots of the film. It's the one where Barry's flying through the air after being hit by a car in slow motion. And I was intrigued to know how you guys achieved that shot. Was it an in-camera thing? Is it a stunt? Is it a mix of VFX? It looks really great, and obviously like it's just a really great comedic beat in what is like a 5 minutes of a comedy of errors, and it's just a really great moment in the film.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. It was just one of those things where I was pitching ideas to Brian, and it was like, what if we end the film and it's just a blank screen and the audience thinks it's over before we just finish torturing this guy one last time with this kind of outrageous, like, he's flying through the air. And it was honestly a really simple shot. We set up a green screen out in the location where we did the car hit. So I think there were like 2 visual effects shots. One where the car is like driving towards him, and that was just 2 different plates. Like one, him lying on the ground, and then the car speeding towards him, obviously for safety reasons. And then the second one with that final shot, it's just Shawn was on a high stool, sort of balanced and pretending like he's flying through the air. We were blasting him with leaf blowers, and then we just composited that against the sky and just had him move, added some motion blur. Shout out to Jamie Tallman, who did the VFX for that. But it was a really simple, VFX composite.
Nice. It looks great.
It started out super complicated. We had that. I used to do some stunts, so we brought some stunt pads, and we had this idea of jumping off the stool and falling onto the stunt pads. And after messing with that for about 20 minutes, I think Kyle, or collectively the adults, said, it doesn't have to be this hard. We can just have him bouncing on the stool. And it worked like gangbusters. And I'm glad you enjoyed all the little elements that got thrown through the frame. We did some symbolic stuff. So there's a wallet, and there's money, and there's change. All of that stuff that was part of Barry's world is now in those last moments just flying through space with him.
Yeah, it was actually kind of funny. I mean, I always in the back of my head knew that we could just put him on the stool and do that composite. But I thought maybe it would add a little bit extra. Like we wouldn't have to like cut out the stool from him sitting on it. And so my thought was to jump off of like a platform or something. And then in that moment of suspension, we shot it on a really high frame rate camera, by the way, that should be mentioned. And I thought like in that moment of suspension in air, that's something that we could sort of elongate for the shot. And so I got these crash pads from a stunt company. but it wasn't the right crash pads that you're supposed to do big falls from. And so I am like in the parking lot in LA of this stunt company. And I was like, well, if I'm going to have my actors do this, I should probably like test it myself. And I was launching myself off of this like loading dock onto these mats. And it was like, it hurt like hell. I was like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. And I didn't realize it was the wrong mats. And of course, we're there out in the woods. I've lugged these massive like crash pads on my pickup truck all the way out there. We never use them. And Shawn, the actor, is like he's not committing to the jump and fall on his back as I was committing. So it was kind of like, damn, bro, you're kind of being wimpy about this. But at the same time, I also had to respect it because having done it, I was like, this hurts. Like, this is not, turns out, not the right crash pads.
There you go.
Gotta have the right crash pads, you know?
I guess that brings in kind of like the interesting element of when you're shooting films on low budget, you have different constraints, whether it be from setting or equipment or actors, anything. And I guess this question is probably more directed at yourself, Brian. Obviously, being on set, how much are you writing on the fly in terms of like changing scenes depending on what's happening on the day? And was there any kind of was there a case of this on Somebody Cares?
Amazingly, not much. As a matter of fact, I think I get more hand slaps from Julien than anything by trying to futz with the script later. He's always like, "Where'd that line go?" And I'd be like, "I took it out. I thought it was too whatever." And he's like, "Let the actor ruin it. If the actor doesn't deliver it well, then we can always lose it." But the dialogue doesn't change that much. The script usually doesn't change that much, especially if Julien has already pitched and we've already talked about what locations we have access to, going back to, what assets we're using. And once, he'll send me pictures and I'll location scout with them. And then we start walking through the scene and do whatever adjustments that we need to. But I think fortunately I have the luxury as a writer of developing this with the director and somebody who's very like-minded. So it usually winds up working out pretty seamlessly.
I think so one thing in the film that was added in post writing of the script that I think is kind of funny is was the whole like birthday through line. That wasn't in the original script. And then I can't remember, maybe there was one line about it. I think it was at the end, about it being his birthday. And then it was like, okay, what if we tie this in a couple more times? So then we have that first line that Barry says when he walks outside of the liquor store, which is a bit improv-y. And I know Brian was sort of rolling his eyes on the day because it was like, how do we like get this in? And then the other time that we added the birthday line in was when they're driving away from the forest clearing the first time. And, Barry says to Vince, like, it was my birthday yesterday. And Vince responds, I get that. So that was written after the fact. It was like, we had this interstitial moment and I was like, Brian, can you think of anything that like, he could be saying in the car that would be really funny. And that he came up with that line that I thought is just like hilarious. So I think it's also like finding those moments where it's like, oh, we could use something here. And Brian's really great at kind of in the moment. I think speaks to him as an actor too. And his improv skills of just all those years of doing theater and stuff in LA. It's just, he's so quick at coming up with some of those lines that I think end up being some of those like repeatable lines that make the film.
I think we got lucky too that we shot it in that order because there's something about the way Shawn, it felt so painful when he said, it's my birthday, but nobody showed up. And that landed so hard. It really stuck to Julien and I. And it was a thing that we wanted to revisit. And because of the order that we'd shot things in, we every time we're like, what could he say here? And it took us back to what we'd already saw Shawn start to develop up to that point. And I think that was a huge payoff that, maybe we got a little bit lucky on. but it's kind of the magic of what happens when you start giving actors like Shawn lines and they start making it their own and it brings it to life. And now it just starts to compound and exponentially we see this character. And when you see someone who's a real character, you start to get what they're going to say next or what they might be feeling in that moment. It really paints in all the dots.
Was there anything in the case of the other Shawn on set, Sean Salisbury, who plays the hitman? Again, I thought he was really great and kind of just perfectly embodied that role. And again, he is not, a professional at this. The wire snaps as he's trying to choke him. He has his own kind of comedy of errors throughout the film as well. I wondered if there was anything with working with Shawn there that you kind of went, oh, I want to highlight this more in the next scene or anything like that.
It was definitely that car scene that Julien had mentioned. We wanted just a little audio in there. And Shawn Parsons says, he has a broken windpipe and he goes, it's my birthday. And the other Shawn says, the hitman goes, yeah, I get that. And that line, that was another instance of the actor filling out that character, that line we were able to find pretty quickly. And then, of course, Shawn delivered it fantastic.
I think, like Vince, the hitman, like he embodies, I think, like one of the themes that we really explore, which I think Brian and I have a general optimistic sense about people, even if, and we struggle with this a lot. Like you want to have that optimism when approaching family or friends. And, even if that they're going to mess things up. And I think that's Vince is in the moment where he's about to kill and beat him to death with this rock. And, he says, I can get you the money. And Vince like looks down at the rock and it's just, he wants to believe him. And I think that's kind of our general optimistic hope for humanity, I guess, is like, even if we don't think that the good outcome is going to be there, we kind of want it to be. And I think that we put that through Vince. So that was that little moment there.
And especially that conflict within a character. We love that. And that's what Vince did so well as the actor. He embraced that resistance of the physical thing that he has to do and what he wants to do internally. And we thought he embodied that really well. We kept on, he couldn't move slow enough for us. Like, we're like, move slower, talk even slower. Like, because it was so interesting, you really felt him thinking about, regretting the next thing he has to do. He really was able to manifest, since he didn't have a lot of dialogue, he really brought that physicality of the conflict of his character just in a beautiful way.
I agree. I think you can totally empathize with him, despite the fact that he kills Shawn at the end of the film. And you're just like, it's very interesting. And at the same time, even though Shawn is the protagonist, you kind of get the sense that he probably is a bit of a sleazy guy. He's a bit of a dirtbag. It is very interesting how you kind of put the kind of protagonist antagonist on its head there. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, obviously, you finished the film and it's been selected for the Sundance Film Festival, and for me, the Sundance Film Festival is kind of like that pinnacle of independent filmmaking and just like an absolute dream festival. Is this your first time, I guess, either going to the festival or showcasing one of your films there?
My first time going and showcasing a film. And yeah, it's absolutely just the pinnacle. I mean, I remember getting the call. I was on a shoot and I just didn't really believe it. I kept asking the programmer if it was a prank call and if one of my friends had put them up to it. And after assuring me that it was actually the Sundance Film Festival, I just, I was beside myself. And
amazing.
Also too, it's just like something that I get to give back to all of those crew members and the actors and Kyle and all these people who showed up for me, through the years, we've gotten into some great festivals, but, I think Sundance is that like holy grail of festivals. And so, yeah, I'm so excited. And I'm also just so excited to like give that to the crew who donated so much of their time. It just feels like, okay, look, it was worth your time to like come and be a part of this. So yeah, anyway, that was a long answer. Brian's been to Sundance a bunch of times.
I've been a few times. Yeah, I've been a few times acting in films, and also just going with other friends who had a film there. This is the first time going with that, having that much coveted filmmaker badge. So that feels pretty incredible. So it's like going for the first time for me, at least as a filmmaker, but with the luxury of at least knowing the layout of the land. And finally getting to experience it, from getting to go up on the stage and talk about the film. I've always gone there and watched people's films and then looking for them later to have that engagement. So now it's just been flipped around. Instead of the fan, I'm going as the filmmaker, and I'm just equally excited to engage with other people to talk about the film that I've been part of, the creative part of it.
Amazing.
I also want to add something, if people are, for the people who are listening, that there were no favors pulled, and we didn't have an in. We didn't know anyone at Sundance that we like slipped our film to and said, hey, can you take a look at this? I mean, we've only made a couple of short films. I think we've only submitted 4 in total to Sundance. So this is like our 4th that we submitted and got in. So, 25% success rate, not so bad. But I think it's really important, because I had myself like, you make a short film as a filmmaker and then you just pay the $65, $75 or whatever it is to, apply to Sundance. It's just kind of like you're at the gas station, you might as well pick up the lottery ticket scratcher and see if you get in. And that's truly what it was. Like, there were no connections, no one vouched for our film. We just, there was a programmer that saw it and fought for us the whole way. I am excited to meet the programmers and find the fans of our film. But yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Out of like 11,000 submissions, they chose 57 short films, and we're one of them. And it's just so. Yeah.
If you're out there making short films, it will really pay off for you to do 2 things. One, go to festivals, go to smaller festivals, because the program will be much more accessible. And the model for film festivals is the same for everyone. It's programmers sit down, they have a ton of films to go through, and then they get in rooms and they debate on the merits of each film. And then the ones that keep on having the most vocal defenders, they keep moving into the next pile until you whittle that giant mountain down into that handful of films that go in. All the other films have their own merit too, as well. So, for us, we kind of laughed because we saw a lot of merit in our other 3 films that we'd submitted. Some of them maybe even more merit than this one, if you start putting parameters of what is a Sundance film. And for this one to have gotten in, we had to embrace that. And we're like, just really thrilled that programmers saw merit in our film, in the film craft, if not the story, and if not the subject matter, just what we did with it. We took something that, honestly, for Julien and I, this is something that our relatives watched and laughed. We really went for entertainment value here in this one. Some of our other films wound up being really complicated, typical for my mom to say, I liked it. What was the person doing with the thing in the, because as filmmakers, sometimes you really get in there and start, wanting to tell a complicated story. And this one was a little more digestible, a little more palatable. And we couldn't be happier to have it in the festival.
I guess as well, the guys behind kind of curating, a short film collection for a festival, are kind of almost like treating it like a playlist in terms of like what's hitting the highs and the lows, and how do they kind of feed into each other. And Are you guys excited to see kind of the other short films that have been selected as well, and seeing like if there's a general kind of through line between them?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we started looking at like Sundance releases those artist videos that you submit. And so I've seen all the other artists in our short film block and like some from other blocks. I'm super excited to see all the films. I have no idea how it's gonna all, mesh together. It'll be really interesting.
Yeah. I wish more people would catch on to this short film block game, because there's not a better theater experience than going in a short amount of time, getting to see 4, 5, 6, 7 stories in 2 hours, because that coffee shop talk afterwards is just through the roof, because they're like, can you believe this one? You've hated some, you've loved some, and the arguments and the banter that happens afterwards.
Yeah.
So it really is a great experience that I wish more non-filmmakers would be privy to. There just so far hasn't been a real platform for that, and that's too bad. And like Julien said, we're super stoked to be in that theater on our own night. We're very much interested in what everybody else has made, and to see 6 or 7 different stories all told within an hour and a half of being in a theater.
Obviously, I don't want to skip too far ahead, because I know you guys are probably excited to go to Sundance and premiere Somebody Cares there. But like, what do you think is next for the film now that you know that you can get into Sundance? Are you thinking of submitting to other festivals? Have you got some in mind? Are you coming to the UK? Yeah, let me know what's next for Somebody Cares.
We have gotten. I might blow up some of the festival programming spot here, but when you get into a film festival like Sundance, some other festivals see the program, and then they send you discount codes, and then you can just like submit to all these places for free.
Interesting, yeah.
Maybe that's a little messed up, but we're gonna take
got some prestige behind you.
Yeah, kind of. It's yeah. So. We're submitting to the festivals that are giving us fee waivers. Would love to, find a festival in the UK for sure. We submitted to Cannes, so
nice.
That's like the other festival big time dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so expensive submitting to festivals.
Yeah.
It winds up, there's so many films where they've spent more on the festival submissions than the budget. And those are real gambles, because what a bummer when you've spent as much on your short film on festival submissions, and then for whatever reason, it just doesn't get programmed.
Yeah, I remember that being such a difficult thing. So I studied film in a university here in England, and we obviously then have all the technology to like help us make these short films, but we were all skint. So we'd make these short films, we'd show them to our peers, and then we'd be like, I don't have £50 ready. I don't, I'm living off of, frozen pizzas. And that was just that kind of tricky situation that comes with when you are trying to get into that world, and I guess kind of hedging your bets that you've made a short film. But obviously great to know that you guys are kind of pushing this one forward. And I hope there's going to be some big things for you going forward. You mentioned earlier you were working on a feature film, and working on a feature film together, I believe. I was just interested to know, is that going to be the next project, or is that something that you're kind of developing alongside maybe a couple of other shorts down the line?
Yeah, I mean, I think beyond just like going to Sundance and having a good time with that, I think our real goal out of Sundance or in these next couple of weeks is we're working on a film called Stealing Las Vegas. The producer that we have on board, Kevin Chenoy, did the Florida project with Willem Dafoe. And we've officially attached Billy Crudup to be our lead. It's a blue-collar Las Vegas heist movie, very much in our tone. And we've raised some money already, but we are just, reaching out to every investor that we know to kind of fill that gap. so that we can shoot hopefully in May is when we're looking to shoot our first feature. So a lot of things are lining up. I mean, I think that's the big thing that we're after is really trying to make that first feature happen. Yeah, that if anything that could come out of Sundance, it would be some investor finds us and wants to take a gamble on our movie.
Nice. Well, you got to hope that, kind of networking is going to be a big thing at Sundance. Obviously, films get bought and sold there, and it's really interesting. Brian, I'm guessing you have come up with the idea and the script for this one. Is that the case?
Julien and I, we usually start batting around ideas, and it's exactly what probably most people would imagine, is that you see a job that's interesting or a location that's interesting, and then you're just talking about what if this person with, if the person's a shoe shine. I'm giving you bad pitches because I'm not going to give away my gold.
Oh, of course.
if you're fascinated about, a shoe shiner, and then you really like, a place in Mississippi, and then you think, espionage or whatever. And that's really how all of these stories just come up very organically. So what Julien and I are constantly doing is building a thick list of characters and locations and occupations and storylines around that. And some of them kind of dwindle and die off. Some of them come back around in our conversations, and those are the ones that we're building on. And so we're very interested in this world of sitting down with other producers and agents, because it is very much a world of, we like what you have. Do you have something like, and then they are talking about their assets or their actors or whatever. And so it's good to have that deep bench of story ideas of different varying budgets that you want to tell. And we're at no loss for stories that we want to tell. We've been making short films for so long. I mean, I feel like every time we're on a location and shooting something, Julien and I will look at each other and we'll be like, hey, it would be a good story. So they just come very organically from hanging out.
That's great. And I guess as well, the shorts kind of form a proof of concept and a tone of voice that maybe you guys are striving for on your feature. Is it the first time for you both working on a feature? Am I right in saying that?
I think in this capacity. Yeah,
in this capacity.
For sure. Yeah.
I was interested to know then, obviously having worked on shorts and commercials and TV, obviously, is there anything from those experiences that you want to hold on to as you kind of adapt into the feature film world? Because I imagine obviously it's going to be a slightly different beast because, it's a longer process and a lot more kind of heads involved. But was there anything you want to hold on to that you had from your short filmmaking experience?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like the Palomino and Swissy series, which was a very tight budget, really prepped us for doing a feature. I kind of feel like a boxer who has been training for that prize fight, and now it's like we're really ready for that prize fight and have a really good sense of what it's going to be like. I think with Palomino and Swissy, it's like a marathon. I think like doing a feature, and I shot a feature that was like a straight to DVD sort of Warner Brothers thing, and it's definitely a marathon, and I think it's just all in the prep. So I think like being ready for that, but something that I would want to take from our short films and something like Somebody Cares is really thinking about like the entertainment value per scene. And also thinking about like the visual entertainment value per scene. I think sometimes like films can really get lost in just like straight dialogue, characters talking to each other. And, with everything being so visual and everyone on TikTok and Instagram and stuff constantly, I just think like that visual storytelling is so important. And it's like almost this return to like, the era of silent movies where it's like you're telling a story like visually. And so taking some of that, I think, is is really important, and just keeping that, you know, remembering that, you know, as we move into this. I think Somebody Cares, like, it's just really entertaining, you know, throughout. I don't feel like there's ever a moment where you're like bored or, you know, kind of checking your watch or anything like that. I mean, I think like, you know, the Everything Everywhere All at Once, for example, was like a massive success, and it's like a great story and it's entertaining, but it's also so visual. And so I think that's like, that's some of the thought process that I want to bring into this feature.
Yeah.
And Alex, you'd asked, you know, what are we taking away from other sets that we've been on? Julien and I didn't just step into this getting to be a writer-director team. We've worked on so many various capacities on other film sets, and hands down, the takeaway for me is you, when you're on those sets where everybody is operating at their highest ability, those are the sets where there's a lot of courtesy between the departments, just people being nice to each other, giving people a chance. When it comes to creativity, I always, nobody operates well under stress. And Somebody Cares is a real testament to, like Julien said, it's one of the funnest shoots we've ever had, with the least amount of pressure and the least amount of stress. And that's the currency and capital that we've gained from doing so many projects together already, and also working with the same people that we're familiar with, which takes away a lot of that panic of what could go wrong and puts us in the world of, hey, even if something comes up, we've always navigated around it and we're going to be fine. And so, yeah, we want to keep that rolling for sure.
Nice. That's great to hear. Like, at the end of the day, filmmaking can be the best job in the world if you kind of, you know, making it with your friends and collaborating and having a good time. On the podcast, we've been working through our blind spots on the Sight and Sound greatest films of all time list. So we've seen a lot of films that are favorites of filmmakers and critics, and you start to see how the classics have kind of influenced modern day filmmakers. And so we always ask this to everybody who's been on the show: what are some of your favorite films that have shaped or influenced the kind of films that you have made or that you wish to make?
Brian?
I was going to let you go first, but I'll jump in. I think it's no secret that we're fans of the Coen brothers, as well as Tarantino. We won Best Writer Director at a Denver series, and I think the best part about winning for Julien and I both was in the award and commentary, they mentioned those two filmmakers as that's what our film felt like. It felt like a Coen brothers and Tarantino film. So you can start rattling off of them. I even went back to Blood Simple, and I can see how someone would say that Blood Simple doesn't stand up today. It feels very much like an indie film, but the story that they told really teased you along with bits of information, and you had to pay attention. And Julien and I always talk about, all we're doing is delivering information in an interesting way and then having it pay off at the end. So yeah, I'll go back to those films as being what inspired me. Was Blood Simple, Coen brothers, for the way they delivered out that information, and then something like Raising Arizona, where the entertainment value was so high. And both of those films equally very much influenced me when it comes to my style of how I approach the story and the script and working with Julien.
Nice.
I think I'll just touch on two films. I think there's so many, it's hard to like really boil it down. I think for Stealing Las Vegas, just to like keep with, you know, talking about this feature, I think Kubrick's The Killing has been like a huge influence, and also Jackie Brown from Tarantino. And I think if you like go back, like you'll see that The Killing definitely influences Tarantino's Jackie Brown. And so I think Stealing Las Vegas, like looking at a lot of those like heist movies, this would be our entrance into the heist genre. And I hope, like, you know, Kubrick and Tarantino, I mean, it feels kind of crazy to say that we want to be sort of regarded in that realm of filmmakers that contribute to the genre, but I think that would be our goal, is that with this feature that we're working on, that we would put forth a piece of work that would hopefully change the way that people see the heist genre, I guess.
Hey, you got to manifest it, you got to manifest it. So yeah, no, those are some great picks. So thank you both. Somebody Cares obviously is going to be in Sundance. I believe on the 31st of January. It might be available to the public for a few days online. So I'll let my listeners know if that is the case. But thank you both for being on the podcast. It's been great to speak to you.
They'll be able to follow more of that, and LasseurGroh.com is where the body of our work lives. So
perfect. Thank you both. Thank you both. I hope you found that conversation interesting and insightful. It's really great to hear from up-and-coming filmmakers in the independent space and how they're getting their stories made and screened at prestigious festivals, how they're progressing in the industry. It is honestly just such a privilege to be able to speak to people about their kind of careers so far. If you listen to our last episode, you'll know that this interview, along with another one, which hasn't come out yet, was delayed due to the ongoing wildfires in Los Angeles. Both Julien and Brian have been affected by these wildfires, and they have friends who have lost their homes in what has been a really terrible situation in California. So after the recording, I asked if there was any way to help, and they mentioned two organizations that I've linked in the show notes. So if any of our listeners would like to support them, the organizations are the Pasadena Humane Society and the World Central Kitchen. But that has been it for today's episode. We'll be back soon with another episode. But for now, I will sign out solo. But don't worry, Chris will be back. That has been the episode for this week. If you've enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a 5-star rating or review. We do really appreciate it. If you'd like to keep up to date with us, make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Film Angle. We also have a Film Angle playlist, so if you want to listen to what we listen to, you can find that in the show notes. But be sure to catch us very soon for some more cinematic discussions. Goodbye.